By the summer of 1944, the situation was grim for Romania. Coming up, the young King Michael turns against Hitler in hopes of saving his country from a Soviet invasion.
Now all the refineries in the rich Ploesti cluster were damaged or knocked out.
Each plane and each man helped to shorten the war.
24 April 1944. Bill Feely, Paul Swearingen, and the rest of B-24 Liberator Destiny Deb's crew bailed out over enemy territory in Romania.
Did everybody get out?
Everybody got out alive. When a bomber got shot down with 10 men on it, on average, only 3 got out alive.
War Stories took Bill Feely back to the very same refinery complex in Ploesti he had been sent to bomb.
When you get on the ground, you rip off your parachute.
Right.
Take off your harness.
Right.
Were you immediately surrounded at that point?
I was surrounded by farmers and little kids, and there's a woman in front of me. She lunged toward me. There was a man behind me. She started beating on him, stopping him from doing something. And I slowly turned around. Here's a man with a 3-foot axe over his head, ready to plant it in my skull. She stopped him and saved my life.
Feely later found out the farmer had lost 2 children during an American bombing mission.
And I didn't have enough guts to tell him I was on that raid.
Feely and Swearingen were interrogated by a Romanian officer and eventually joined some 600 Allied prisoners of war in a camp in Bucharest.
What's the living condition like?
I'm having lice crawl up my nose and in my ear and many other places.
The worst thing is we didn't get a lot of good food. I still remember the day I got a piece of jawbone in my soup, complete with teeth.
Is this the prison camp that had belonged to King Michael's regiment?
Yes, right.
Is that where he came to visit?
Yes. He came in there and he says, I cannot visit you anymore because of the situation we have here with our occupiers. I wish I could do something, but I can't.
But he did provide enough money to give each POW 10 cigarettes a day. They were well received by all the POWs who felt very kindly about King Michael.
Bitter house-to-house fighting that has culminated in a Nazi disaster.
Stalin's dream of a communist empire was fast becoming reality as his Red Army crushed Hitler's troops and swept into Eastern Europe. Over 2 million Soviet troops now exacted fierce revenge on anyone who'd cooperated with Hitler. Churchill and Roosevelt ignored the Soviet savagery. What mattered to them was that the Red Army continued to fight to the death against the Nazis.
A deal had been struck. And there were deals within deals within deals. So long as those Red Army troops were sitting on Eastern Europe, what was anybody to do?
Washington was not in any deep and sustained way planning for the post-war period or alive and sensitive to what would be Russian ambitions to take over, occupy, and create a communist buffer.
Joe Stalin, when he talks to FDR, says, oh, it's going to be no problem. We're going to restore democratic states in Eastern Europe, and then the Red Army will go home. Simple. William Donovan, head of the OSS, says, I don't believe him.
Donovan was highly suspicious and desperately wanted to expose Stalin. Little did the spy master know he'd soon get his chance.
By August 23rd, 1944, the Soviet army was massed on the Romanian border, and there was nothing that the Romanian army could do to stop them. The king, Maniu, and others had waited as long as they possibly could.
We decided that now something has to be done, otherwise Romania was finished.
When Antonescu is summoned to the palace that morning, does he have any idea what's going to happen to him?
No. No, he doesn't. The king was very blunt.
I said, the situation is so bad in the front, get out of this. So he said, no, I'm not doing that. I gave my word to Hitler.
And I think Antonescu thought he was not serious.
Bluffing.
Bluffing.
I said, well, I'm very sorry. I've got nothing else I can do. I got 3 NCOs. The door burst open, 3 of them come in and put their hands on him.
3 Antonescu was stunned at his arrest.
Antonescu turned around and spat at me. And said, tomorrow you'll all be hanging in the square outside.
What was the German response?
They stuck us, the king. They bombed several points, but especially the palace. They wanted to get me.
Hitler was furious. For 7 days, his bombs rained down on Bucharest. But by 31 August, the Nazi army was in full retreat. On that same day, led by Marshal Radion Malinovsky, 500,000 Soviet troops marched into Bucharest as liberators.
The most striking feature of the pictures of the Red Army's entry into the Romanian capital is the welcome given by the people of Bucharest.
The Russians were very brutal. They raped many of the women. They took what they wanted.
How long is it before the Soviets start to install, essentially, a puppet government?
They began almost immediately.
They wanted to create new society. That was the main objective of the communists in Europe.
Directly west of Romania, Yugoslavia was already entrenched in a bloody civil war between communist Josip Broz Tito and royalist Draza Mihailovic. Sava Stepanovic was 16 years old when he joined Mihailovic's Chetniks in 1943. By then, the focus of the royalists had changed from fighting the Germans to fighting against Tito and communism.
How big was the resistance unit that you were with?
About 150. When Mihailovich started the resistance, the Germans had a tremendous repressor on the population. Hitler gave instruction that for each German soldier, 100 hostages would be killed, executed, and 54 wounded.
Yugoslavia can only be described as a political 8-ring circus. You had Tito heading up the communist partisans who were in opposition to the non-communists known as the Chetniks, who were initially supported by Great Britain and the United States, but later lost their support. Meanwhile, Adolf Hitler is saying, what I'm going to do is kill everybody there if I have to.
Tito wasn't fighting the Germans. He was fighting Mihailovich.
That's good. He was fighting Mihailovich. For Tito, it was probably more important to fight Mihailovich because he was a real enemy who is denying him to come in power.
Like Romania, Yugoslavia was tangled in a web of opposing political ideologies. Both would fall behind the Iron Curtain, their people subject to decades of brutal communist regime.
There's more war stories from Eastern Europe just ahead on the Fox News Channel. Stay with us.
To the Allied cause, even if it was given at the 11th hour.
On 23 August 1944, King Michael and the Romanian underground ousted Hitler's puppet, Ion Antonescu, in a dramatic coup.
We were doing this to try and get out of the war.
How do you find out about the coup?
I was friendly with this sergeant. You know, he'd come over and says, Pace, Pace, Maduka Casa, Datukia Casa. Translation, I'm going home and you're going home.
Bill Feely, Paul Swearingen, and over 1,000 other Allied POWs were free, but had no way of getting home.
We had to devise our own ways of doing it.
Colonel Gunn, the ranking officer, of course, was responsible for us. He went to the Romanian military and see if they had any way to get us home.
We found this Romanian prince, and he talked Colonel Gunn to crawl into this Messerschmitt 109. And he would fly him to Italy and land at the 15th Air Force.
In a German fighter?
In a German fighter. They painted the American flag on the side of the airplane.
All he had to do was to go to the powers that be, tell them our predicament, how many we were, and they would send somebody to Bucharest and make arrangements to get us out.
I see this Messerschmitt flying over the field, and I think, God, why aren't the Limeys shooting them down?
23-year-old combat cameraman Al Saldarini witnessed Colonel James Gunn's arrival. His Romanian pilot, Prince Bazu Kentakazino, stepped out first and said,
Anybody got a screwdriver? So the captain jumped down on the wing, walked to the back of the fuselage, and started to unscrew the plate where the radios were. And as soon as that dropped off, we all saw, my golly, GI boots. And Captain Gunn came out of the thing.